What if the world we know is not as random as it seems? Throughout history, strange coincidences have left us questioning whether there's an invisible pattern guiding the events of our lives. From unexplained alignments in history to eerie repetitions that defy logic, these occurrences challenge our understanding of reality. Welcome to Facts Intrigue. Today, we're unraveling some of the most baffling coincidences and patterns that have puzzled historians, scientists, and thinkers alike. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you don't miss a single mystery. Now, let's dive into the world of coincidences that simply cannot be explained. Let's begin with one of the most famous cases of eerie similarities in history, the Lincoln-Kennedy coincidences. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, and John F. Kennedy, the 35th, were both assassinated, and the parallels between their lives and deaths are nothing short of unsettling. Consider this: Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, while Kennedy was elected to Congress exactly 100 years later, in 1946. Lincoln became president in 1860, Kennedy in 1960, again, a century apart. But it doesn't stop there. Both were shot on a Friday, in the presence of their wives, and both were succeeded by men named Johnson, Andrew Johnson, born in 1808, and Lyndon Johnson, born exactly 100 years later, in 1908. Even more bizarre is the fact that Lincoln was shot in Ford's theater, while Kennedy was shot in a car, a Lincoln, made by Ford. These parallels continue, leaving many to wonder, could it be more than mere coincidence? Are we witnessing a strange pattern that transcends time itself? The strange parallels between Lincoln and Kennedy leave us questioning whether history sometimes repeats itself in ways we can't explain. But not all mysteries are tied to politics and presidents. Sometimes, they come in the form of warnings, dark omens that seem to predict disaster. Our next story takes us to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where a strange creature appeared just before tragedy struck, where sightings of a strange creature in the 1960s led to one of the most chilling coincidences in modern history, the Moth Man prophecies. Over the span of 13 months, numerous locals reported seeing a large, winged creature with glowing red eyes. The creature was dubbed the Moth Man, and soon after its first appearance, strange events began to unfold. But the most significant coincidence came on December 15, 1967, when the Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. Many believe the Mothman sightings were an omen of the disaster. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the Mothman vanished after the tragedy, leading some to speculate that the creature was a harbinger of doom, appearing only when catastrophe loomed. What was the Mothman? A figment of the town's imagination? Or was it part of a larger, inexplicable pattern of events that culminated in disaster? The eerie timing of its sightings and the bridge collapse leaves us questioning whether some coincidences are warnings, rather than chance. An eerie prophecy of doom, the Mothman may have been a harbinger of disaster. But what happens when fiction seems to predict reality? As strange as the Mothman's appearances were, an author's chilling story, written years before one of history's greatest tragedies, seems to defy coincidence entirely. Let's turn to the story of the Titanic and the remarkable foresight of an author named Morgan Robertson. Fiction often mirrors reality, but in the case of Morgan Robertson's novella Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, the similarities between the book and the real-life tragedy of the Titanic are downright eerie. Published in 1898, Robertson's novella tells the story of an unsinkable ship called the Titan, which, on its maiden voyage across the North Atlantic, strikes an iceberg and sinks, resulting in a massive loss of life. 14 years later, in 1912, the Titanic, heralded as the world's largest and safest ship, met the same fate, striking an iceberg and sinking in the North Atlantic. The similarities between the fictional Titan and the real Titanic go far beyond their names. Both ships were described as being nearly the same size, both were traveling at high speeds when they struck the iceberg, and both lacked an adequate number of lifeboats. How could Robertson have written such a prescient story, more than a decade before the Titanic's construction? Was it merely a chilling coincidence, or did he unknowingly tap into some deeper, unseen pattern in history? The sinking of the Titanic and its eerie fictional counterpart remind us that sometimes, stories seem to mirror reality in ways we can't explain. But coincidences aren't confined to ships or sea disasters. Sometimes, they appear in our own lives, almost as if fate has a sense of humor. And nothing captures this better than the lives of two identical twins separated at birth, only to find their paths were more alike than anyone could have imagined. In 1979, a story surfaced that captured the world's imagination, a tale of identical twin brothers who were separated at birth and adopted by different families. The brothers, who were reunited for the first time as adults, discovered that their lives had been remarkably similar in ways that defied explanation. Both brothers were named James by their adoptive families. Both had dogs named Toy, married women named Linda, divorced, and then remarried women named Betty. Even more incredibly, both held similar jobs as sheriffs, smoked the same brand of cigarettes, and drank the same brand of beer. Was this the result of some deep genetic connection that extended beyond physical traits, or are we seeing a strange pattern of human life that no science can fully explain? The story of the Grimm twins, as they came to be known, challenges everything we thought we knew about destiny, free will, and coincidence. The uncanny lives of the Grimm twins force us to question just how much control we really have over our own destinies. But for some, it's not people or events that hold the strangest patterns, it's numbers. Numbers seem to crop up in history in ways that are hard to ignore, and there's one number in particular that has captivated and mystified people for centuries: 23. Let's dive into the enigma of this seemingly ordinary number and the strange occurrences that surround it. For centuries, people have been fascinated by the number 23, claiming it holds a strange significance in both historical events and human consciousness. Known as the 23 Enigma, it has been linked to everything from mathematics to conspiracy theories, sparking debates about whether it is merely coincidence or a sign of something deeper. One of the earliest known connections to the number comes from ancient mathematics, where the sum of 2 and 3 equals 5, the first prime numbers that together hold a special place in numerology. But that's just the beginning. In literature, William Shakespeare is often tied to the number. He was both born and died on April 23rd, and some believe that this significant date ties him to the mystery of 23. Even in the world of film, the number has appeared, most famously in the 2007 movie The Number 23, where the main character becomes obsessed with finding patterns related to the number in his life. When we look to history, the enigma continues to present itself in bizarre ways. Take Julius Caesar, who was assassinated by being stabbed 23 times by members of the Roman Senate. This fact has led some to speculate that the number 23 has always been present in moments of great historical consequence. Some mathematicians and scholars believe that the number's appearance in seemingly random places can be attributed to confirmation bias, where people tend to notice the number 23 more frequently because they are looking for it. However, its presence in literature, history, and culture continues to raise questions. Perhaps it's just a number, or perhaps, as some claim, there's a pattern to the universe that we are only beginning to understand. In the end, the mystery of the number 23 reminds us of the strange ways the human mind tries to make sense of the world around us. Numbers may seem random, but their recurrence can make us wonder whether there's an unseen force guiding their significance. And just as numbers seem to predict strange events, so too can the written word. Our next story centers around one of history's most famous authors, Edgar Allan Poe, whose tale of a shipwrecked cabin boy appeared to predict a real-life tragedy many years later. Edgar Allan Poe, one of history's most famous literary figures, was known for his eerie and macabre tales. But in 1838, with the publication of the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, he may have done something far more chilling. He may have predicted the future. In the novel, Poe describes a shipwreck in which the survivors, stranded with no food, are forced to resort to cannibalism. The victim in the story? A cabin boy named Richard Parker. Nearly 50 years later, in 1884, a yacht named the Mignonette set sail from England to Australia. After the yacht was wrecked, the survivors were stranded at sea for days, without food or water. Desperate, they resorted to cannibalism, killing and eating a young cabin boy. His name? Richard Parker. Was this just a bizarre coincidence, or did Poe somehow tap into a future event through his writing? To this day, the case of Richard Parker remains one of the most unsettling literary coincidences in history. Poe's eerie prediction reminds us that sometimes, truth is stranger than fiction. But what happens when the truth is hidden? When stories are buried and forgotten, perhaps intentionally? Our next mystery takes us beyond Earth itself, to the realm of space exploration, where rumors of lost cosmonauts, whose missions were erased from history, that has captured imaginations, one involving the early space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, at the height of the Cold War, rumors began to spread about so-called Phantom Cosmonauts, astronauts who had allegedly been sent into space by the Soviet Union but whose missions were covered up after they met tragic fates. In 1960, a pair of Italian brothers, the Giudica Cordiglia siblings, claimed to have intercepted radio transmissions from space that recorded the final moments of cosmonauts whose missions were never publicly acknowledged by the USSR. These transmissions allegedly contained the voices of men and women, breathing heavily, reporting equipment malfunctions, and in some cases, seeming to bid farewell as they drifted further into space. The official history of space exploration does not recognize these phantom missions, but the idea that there are forgotten or erased pioneers of space, lost to history, continues to captivate conspiracy theorists and researchers. Are these phantom cosmonauts merely part of a Cold War cover-up, or are they part of a larger, more mysterious pattern that reflects the price of human ambition? The mystery of the phantom cosmonauts reminds us that not all tragedies are recorded, and some may be covered up. But sometimes, it's the tragedies we know about that carry the most unnerving coincidences. Take, for example, the Hoover Dam, where a father and son were both victims of the same ill-fated project, 13 years apart, to the day. The Hoover Dam is one of the great engineering marvels of the 20th century, but it is also the site of a pair of tragedies that have left some believing in a fateful connection. The dam, built between 1931 and 1936, claimed the lives of over 100 workers. Among them was a man named J.G. Tierney, who tragically drowned on December 20, 1922, during the dam's initial survey work. His death marked the first of many to come during the project. Exactly 13 years later to the day, on December 20, 1935, another life was claimed by the Hoover Dam. This time, it was Patrick Tierney, J.G. Tierney's son. The coincidence of father and son both losing their lives in connection to the dam, on the same calendar date, has led some to speculate about the nature of fate and tragedy. Are such events purely coincidental, or are there forces beyond our understanding that shape these connections across time? The Hoover Dam remains a testament to human ingenuity, but it also carries the weight of these eerie, tragic patterns. The Hoover Dam's tragic coincidences force us to consider whether fate plays a larger role than we'd like to admit. And if anyone knew the power of timing, it was Mark Twain. Twain's life was bound to an astronomical event, one that marked both his arrival and his departure from this world. Mark Twain, the famous American author, had a unique connection to Halley's Comet, one that he himself acknowledged in his lifetime. Halley's Comet, a celestial body that passes Earth approximately once every 76 years, made one of its appearances in 1835, the same year that Twain was born. Twain, whose real name was Samuel Clemens, predicted that he would die during the comet's next appearance in 1910. In 1909, Twain famously said, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." True to his prediction, Twain passed away on April 21, 1910, just one day after Halley's Comet made its closest approach to Earth. Was Twain's death simply a coincidence, or was there some strange cosmic synchronicity at play? While we may never know the answer, the connection between Twain's life and the comet has become one of the most famous examples of uncanny timing in history. Mark Twain's cosmic connection to Halley's Comet leaves us in awe of the strange intersections between life and the stars. But not all coincidences come from the distant cosmos. Sometimes, they strike much closer to home, and even space missions are not immune to the bizarre and unexpected. In our next story, we'll explore a strange and electrifying moment in history, one that took place during the Apollo 12 mission, when lightning struck not once, but twice, in a way that no one could have predicted. Space exploration is often thought of as a precise and calculated endeavor, but there are times when even the most well-prepared missions face strange coincidences that defy explanation. One such case happened on November 14, 1969, with the launch of Apollo 12, the sixth crewed mission in NASA's Apollo program and the second to land on the Moon. Just seconds after liftoff, something unthinkable happened. The spacecraft was struck by lightning, twice. The first strike occurred just 36 seconds into the flight, followed by a second lightning bolt at 52 seconds. Remarkably, despite this double strike, the mission continued, and the crew safely made their journey to the Moon and back. The odds of a rocket being struck by lightning during its ascent are astronomically low, but Apollo 12 experienced two strikes in less than a minute, leading some to believe that fate, or perhaps something more mysterious, was at play. The lightning strikes didn't just cause a momentary glitch. They knocked out fuel cells and temporarily disabled all three fuel cells that powered the spacecraft. Thanks to the quick thinking of the flight controllers and the crew, disaster was averted. Was this just an unlucky coincidence, or was there something more at work? Whatever the case, the strange and unpredictable forces of nature left an indelible mark on the Apollo program, reminding us that no matter how much we prepare, the universe always has surprises in store. As we've seen today, strange coincidences and patterns seem to weave themselves into the very fabric of history, challenging our understanding of the world. From the eerie parallels between historical figures to the uncanny timing of celestial events, these coincidences raise questions about whether there are unseen forces at work, guiding events in ways we can't fully comprehend. Are these patterns simply a product of chance, or do they point to something deeper, some invisible order that shapes our reality? While we may never have definitive answers, the stories of these coincidences remind us that the world is full of mysteries, and sometimes, the truth is stranger than fiction. Thank you for joining us on this journey through strange coincidences. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with others who love diving into the mysteries of the world. Stay curious, stay intrigued, and remember, there's always more to discover.